I finished Monster Hunter Wilds. Not only did I finish it, I did pretty much everything there was to do in the game, and honestly, I still prefer World. Not only do I prefer it, I recently made a brand new character in World, and for some reason, I couldn't stop playing. That's what led me to make this video. I noticed some very big differences in the two that made me realize what Wilds was lacking. Before I get into it, just know I enjoy both games, but Wilds was a bit of a letdown. Maybe my expectations were too high, maybe not. Either way, this is just my opinion. Feel free to let me know what you think in the comments. What I want to touch on first is the recent review bombing that Monster Hunter Wilds has seen. This is a complicated subject, and many other problems have come out of this. I'm not going to be talking about this, but from what I saw about the recent negative reviews, most mention the performance while stating that the game is solid. This is where I stand. Now, let's get into the video. Let's start with nostalgia, since I know it plays a role. Loading into Astair and hearing that music really does hit different, but I'll try to put that aside and focus on what really made World feel better for me. The number one thing I dislike about Wilds compared to World is the art style. I don't care if anyone wants to say Wilds has more detail or technically better graphics. When I look at World, it looks vibrant, colorful, and full of life. Wilds looks fairly desaturated and flat in comparison, and almost every location feels very washed out. World technically does have worse graphics on paper, but the art style just makes the game look way better in my opinion. The only place I'd say looks decent is the Windward Plains during the Plenty environmental state, and honestly even then, most of World's locations just look better. Places like the Coral Highlands, Rotten Vale, and Elder's Recess all had a reason to exist, made sense, based on what we saw going on in the world. In Wilds, most areas feels like visual reskins. They exist more for aesthetic variation and not functional variety. Each location in World also felt more alive, with the environment and creatures living there, along with the fact that each location felt like there was a reason for it to exist, such as the Rotten Vale, where monsters went to die. It was such a small touch that made every location feel way more unique to me than most places in Wilds. Just take a look at the Elder's Recess for example. The first time you get there in the game, you see crystals formed, looking to be beaming with energy, and then you go explore, find a place full of lava with a different monster, a really high area where monsters like Kushala was, crystallized areas where Nergigante hung out. It seemed like a place where elders would be. Now let's talk about the seamless open world in Wilds. Why? Why is it a thing? It feels like it's just there so that Capcom could say it's an open world. The zones are technically connected, but the connection doesn't really add anything. Windward Plains, for example, just feels like a giant empty desert. The Scarlet Forest feels like a watered down ancient forest. The other areas aren't memorable at all. Each one feels like it exists and looks different, not play different. In World, in my opinion, each location felt distinct in both design and gameplay impact. There's one reason why the world feels so meaningless, at least to me, and that reason is the secret. The secret mount is a huge part of what makes the open world feel meaningless. I didn't play Rise, I tried it, but it felt way too arcadey, but I understand where this mount system came from. The problem in Wilds is how much it removes from exploration. You can press a button, hop on your secret, and it auto paths to the monster, literally through the fastest path possible. I literally found myself pressing the D-pad and going on my phone until I got to the monster. There's no incentive to explore, and it strips the world of any interactivity. I'm not saying World is perfect. Running through the ancient forest could be annoying, especially through certain quests, but Wilds goes way too far in the other direction. The secret even affects combat, which sucks. When you get knocked down, you can summon it to auto-move you away. You can then heal when riding without risk. That completely removes the punishment aspect that you used to get from mistiming dodges, or with poor positioning, or when you misread a monster's attacks. Now there's some good additions to combat. I'm gonna say that the ability to carry two weapons and switch between them is a really good addition that should have probably been in other games. The offset attack is also really solid, and it really adds a depth to the combat, which opens up a bunch of new playstyles for a lot of new weapons. But then we come to the wound system, and I'm not gonna lie, at first, when I first saw the gameplay trailers, I thought it was a pretty clever idea. After playing through the game, it just breaks the pacing. Every time you hit a focus strike on a wound, the monster gets stunned. You do a combo, cause more wounds, and then repeat. Add paralysis or regular stun effects and or even things like sleep, and the monster isn't moving for half the hunt. The only monsters I found that this really didn't apply to were most of the tempered monsters and later game monsters that were more challenging. There were also a fair bit of changes to weapons that was brought into Wilds compared to World, and I can't speak to any of them really except the hammer, as that's the only one I've really played. But based on what I've seen, most of the changes look pretty good. For example, with the hammer, the Mighty Charge attack was a really solid attack that roped together a bunch of combos that already existed from World and kind of made everything feel more fluid. One thing I've noticed in the difference between the combat in Wilds and World is World's combat felt like it had more impact and each hit felt heavier and more satisfying. Something else I saw a lot of people complain about was monster variety. I actually think it's pretty solid, especially compared to World's launch roster. I think it's fairly comparable. Some fights were great. Jin Dahad was a standout for me. The cool arena and ways to interact with it was solid. And Zoshia was also really good, though you could only fight it once at launch, which is fixed by Title Update 1. Other than these two, I would say Goro Magala, Arcveiled, and Rei Dao are all great fights and was a great addition to the game. One thing I gotta hand to the game is the music during some of these fights, especially during the Rei Dao fight, which I really enjoyed. I can't comment much on difficulty since I've played all of World and Iceborne, and Wilds just naturally felt easier as the next game. But I do think certain aspects have been way too streamlined. The first fight in Wilds is forgettable, and most quests lack narrative or world building in my eyes. Compare that to World, and everything felt cooler to me. The research base, Zora Magnaros, and most characters were more memorable. You also can't forget the Dragonator. In World, each hunt for some reason felt like it had a purpose. Monsters invading habitats, causing problems, or playing a role. Wilds, from my experience, just throws you into fights. Every single quest you did in World felt like it led to something bigger. And yes, I know, some of the Zora Magnaros quests, actually both the Zora Magnaros quests, were fairly painful, but it's just getting through that, it still added something else to the game where after that Zora Magnaros quest, for example, the second one, Elder's Resource opens up. Right, so I feel like that added something else to the game that kind of was lacking from Moz a little bit. This is where World shines for me. The loop of tracking monsters, prepping, crafting gear, and slowly working your way up to stronger monsters, that felt like hunting. Wilds does the same thing, but it cuts out a fair bit. Yes, it's fast paced, but too much was removed. I never felt like I had to go gather materials or complete side quests. In World, I found myself doing the most optional quests just to upgrade the canteen or get a new item. That extra layer of immersion is gone. In Wilds, I was just queuing into quests, hopping on the secret and killing the monster. Then I'll do it again, and it felt shallow. And finally, the performance. This was Wild's biggest problem at launch, especially on PC. The game launched in a very rough state. Frame generation was required just to hit 60 FPS on recommended specs, which is insane. Frame gen is pretty much only supposed to be used as a way to smooth things out after the game's already running pretty well, and not compensate for poor optimization, which I could tell Capcom was relying on. Even after the latest updates, I still have problems. I ran World, for example, at 1440p, medium to high settings, and got 90 to 100 FPS. Wilds at 1080p with DLSS frame gen on performance mode, I get 60 to 80 FPS. And texture pop-in is still a major issue, which leads to many great gameplay moments like this. The funniest part is that I was going to record some Wilds gameplay for this video, but the game kept freezing for 10 to 15 seconds at a time. Overall though, performance is getting better, and obviously it's going to continue to get better. And from what I hear, World also has some problems with the PC launch back in the day. Wilds will absolutely improve over time, but to be honest, I don't see it hitting the same level that World and Iceborne did for me. The first two title updates are absolutely a great step in the right direction though. and I will absolutely hop back in whenever more content gets added. At the end of the day, I'm not saying Wilds is a bad game. I enjoyed it, but it didn't leave the same impact World did. The atmosphere, the gameplay loop, and even the smallest detail in World felt more deliberate. Wilds has some great ideas, but it's missing the sense of purpose, and that's why, even after finishing it, I keep finding myself going back to Monster Hunter World.